Please leave a comment where you are watching from. It was a Tuesday, one of those forgettable days wrapped in gray drizzle and the heavy sky that settles over coastal towns like Ellesmere. The kind of day that seeps into your bones and makes you question if the sun ever existed at all. I'd been putting it off for ages, the windows. They hadn't been cleaned in years. No one in my family seemed to care. They'd fogged over with enough grime to make even the brightest day look like dusk. But something in me snapped that morning. Maybe it was the claustrophobia of being stuck at home too long. Maybe it was the silence. So I hauled out the ladder, filled a bucket, and grabbed a sponge. A small victory, a task ticked off the mental to-do list. As I climbed the ladder propped against the front of my parents' old stone house, I remember feeling oddly proud, like I was doing something meaningful. I had one foot on the second-to-last rung, sponge in hand, when my phone buzzed in my jacket pocket. A stupid instinct made me reach for it. I slipped. The ground rushed up with terrifying speed. My left arm hit first, a bolt of pain so intense it stole my breath. I remember staring up at the overcast sky, everything spinning slightly, my phone resting face up inches from my cheek, still ringing. The local ambulance took 20 minutes. I was in shock. My mother fluttered nervously around me while my dad just kept saying, "You should have waited. Should have let it be." They brought me to Ellesmere Community Hospital. I'd passed it 1,000 times, this bleak, concrete building squatting on the edge of town, surrounded by overgrown hedges and faded signs. Built in the 60s, it hadn't aged well. Brutalist in architecture, stubborn in spirit. I had never been inside. The automatic doors groaned open slower than I expected, almost like the hospital itself was reluctant to take me in. The smell hit me next, that unique blend of old disinfectant, warm plastic, and something metallic underneath it all. After a painfully awkward x-ray and a bone reset that made me nearly faint, they wheeled me up to the 3rd floor. "You're lucky," the porter said. "Private room. Usually reserved, but we've got a lull. Room 309. The walls were an institutional beige. The window overlooked the car park, where seagulls squawked endlessly. A small television buzzed in the corner, playing reruns of a regional news show. I turned it off. Silence filled the room like cold water. By then, the painkillers had begun to take hold. I remember laying back, eyes closed, just breathing. And then I heard it. At first, I thought it was part of a dream. A faint sound. High-pitched. Repeating. A baby. Crying. Not loud. Not sharp or desperate. Just persistent. I opened my eyes. The room was dim, lit only by a flickering corridor light sneaking in through the small glass pane in the door. The crying faded, then came back, as if it was moving. And then I heard it. A voice. Shh. Soft. Like a lullaby hummed by someone very, very tired. I stared at the ceiling, unsure what to do. Maybe someone had brought a baby in? Maybe a young mother in recovery was nearby. The sound returned. This time closer. I sat up, pain stabbing through my left side. I reached with my good hand for the nurse call button and pressed it. Several minutes passed before someone arrived. She was in her late 20s, kind eyes, name tag reading Jess. "Everything all right?" she asked. "Yeah, sorry, I was just wondering, is there a baby on this floor? Or a young mother? I keep hearing crying." She frowned gently. "Not on this floor, no. 3rd floor's mostly ortho and rehab. You might be hearing something from the lower levels. This place echoes weird sometimes." I also heard a woman. She was whispering, telling it to hush. Jess tilted her head, smile still on but thinner. "I'll take a look down the hall just in case." I thanked her. She left, her footsteps fading into the long corridor. And then, before she even turned the corner, the crying started again. Only this time, it was right outside my door. I froze. "Shh." The whisper was closer now. I pressed my back deeper into the mattress, barely breathing. The handle on the door didn't turn. The window pane in the door remained empty. Eventually, Jess returned. "Nothing, love. Checked the whole wing. Quiet as a grave." I forced a laugh. "Weird. Guess I'm hearing things. It happens. This place, it plays tricks. Especially when you're doped up." She smiled again and left. I turned the TV back on, more for the sound than anything else, and drifted into a medicated half-sleep. The crying didn't return. Not that night. I was discharged 2 days later. Arm in a cast. Instructions to rest and not attempt any home repairs. I didn't say anything more about what I heard. I didn't want to seem mad. Over time, it faded from my mind. Life picked up pace. My arm healed. I started dating, moved into a flat, changed jobs. Years passed. Then one summer, I was at a garden party for my niece's birthday. My sister-in-law, Rachel, had just taken a float nurse job. Over cider and barbecue smoke, we chatted casually. "Where are you working now?" I asked. She hesitated. "Ellesmere Community. Nights mostly." I blinked. "Still open?" "Barely. They keep threatening to shut it down. It's falling apart." "I stayed there once. Broke my arm. 3rd floor." She sipped her drink. "That place gives me the creeps." I looked at her. "Yeah." She glanced around, then leaned in. "Don't laugh, but I think it's haunted." I didn't laugh. "By what?" I asked. "They call her the Whispering Mother. It's kind of an urban legend around there. Years ago, a woman came in after a mental break. Severe postpartum psychosis. She smothered her baby. Then herself. On the 3rd floor. I froze. Rachel continued. "They say she walks the halls at night, still trying to soothe her baby. People hear the crying. And her voice. Telling it to hush." My mouth went dry. "Which room was it?" She frowned. "Don't know the exact one, but I work on the northeast wing. Room 309. That one creeps me out the most." The world tilted. My fingers clenched around the glass. "That was my room," I said quietly. She went pale. Neither of us spoke after that for a long while. Now every time I pass that hospital, windowless and rotting like a forgotten tomb, I swear I feel something shift behind the glass. Like it remembers me. Like she remembers me. I never believed in ghosts. Not truly. Not until my mother told me about her. It was snowing the night she opened up, thick, lazy flakes floating over the Inverness rooftops like ash. I was home from Edinburgh for the holidays, curled up on her worn floral sofa with a mug of tea and a belly full of her lentil soup. The fire in the hearth crackled and popped. The old house smelled of peat and memories. We were talking about nothing in particular when I asked, "Do you miss it?" "The hospital?" She didn't answer right away. She stared at the fire, her face lined with years of night shifts and lost sleep. Then she said softly, "I miss the work. Not the girl." I laughed. "The girl?" Her eyes flicked to me. "You're not going to laugh? Not unless you're joking." She wasn't. I could see that now. "They called her the girl in the crimson robe," she said. I felt a prickle run down my arms. My mum, Catherine MacLeod, worked as a nurse at Inverness Royal Infirmary for over 3 decades. She was tough, stoic, not the sort to jump at bumps in the night. So when she leaned in, her voice barely above a whisper, I listened. She was maybe 7 or 8 years old, she began. Small, pale, blonde, and she wore this deep red dressing gown, the old-fashioned kind, tied at the waist, always barefoot. The first time Mum heard about her was in 1996. She was stationed on the respiratory ward, where the patients were mostly elderly, many in palliative care. It was the kind of place where silence settled like dust and death was a quiet companion. Night shifts, there had a strange stillness to them. The hum of machines, occasional coughing, the glow of green and red lights on monitors. One night, just past 2 a.m., the call buzzer rang in room 14. A man named Mr. Lennox. Lung cancer. Mum went in, thinking he needed help adjusting his oxygen or another shot of morphine. But he was sitting bolt upright in bed, his eyes wide. "She was here," he whispered. "Who?" "The little girl," he said, pointing to the foot of the bed. "She was standing right there. Red robe." Then she ran off. Mum checked the corridor. Nothing. No visitors. No staff had seen a child. Visiting hours ended long ago, and children were never allowed on that ward after hours. She assumed it was a morphine dream. Hallucinations weren't uncommon. But then another patient saw her. And another. Always the same. She was standing by the bed. She was just watching me. She ran out when I opened my eyes. Every single one of them died within the day. She never said anything? I asked, gripping my mug tighter. Mum shook her head. Never spoke. Never smiled. Just stood there. What did she want? We didn't know. But after a while, we all started to believe she wasn't lost. She had a purpose. Like a guide. Mum gave a small nod. A ferryman almost. Gentle. She didn't scare the patients. She didn't hurt anyone. But if you saw her, it meant your time was up. Mum didn't say anything the first few times. But one night, while sitting at the nurse's station with Agnes McBain, an old-school matron with iron-gray hair and a thick Highland accent, she finally asked, "Do you think the patients are seeing something real? Agnes didn't look up from her crossword. You've seen her, then? Mum blinked. What? The girl. Crimson robe. Runs out the room. We've all seen her. It was the matter-of-factness that chilled her. From then on, it became part of the silent knowledge shared among the night nurses. If a patient saw the girl, you didn't ask too many questions. You comforted them, sat with them, made sure they weren't alone when the time came. None of the nurses chased her. None tried to follow her. That wasn't part of the deal. But one night, Mum saw her for herself. It was February 2003, a brutal winter with snow drifts like small hills and a cold that bit straight through your scrubs. Catherine had drawn a double shift due to short staffing. Just past 3:30 a.m., she was doing a quiet walkthrough of the ward. Her shoes squeaked on the linoleum, and the soft yellow light above cast long shadows between the beds. She passed room 18. The door was cracked open. Inside lay Mrs. Carr, an old woman with pneumonia, and the fading spark of someone waiting for permission to leave. Mum glanced inside to check on her, and saw her, standing quietly at the foot of the bed. The girl, just as described. Crimson robe, bare feet, pale skin that almost glowed in the low light. Her hair was parted neatly down the middle, tied into two blonde plaits. She didn't turn to Mum, didn't even acknowledge her. She just stood there, watching Mrs. Carr sleep. Then, without a sound, she turned and ran. Straight through the open door. Down the corridor. Mum didn't move. Couldn't. She said her breath caught in her throat, and her feet felt like they were made of stone. Mrs. Carr died before sunrise. Did you ever see her again? I asked. Mum stared at the fire for a long moment. No. Once was enough. Do you think she was a ghost? She shrugged. A ghost, a spirit, something else. I think she was helping. It never felt cruel. What about the patients? Were they scared? Most weren't. A few were. But more often than not, they seemed calm. Like seeing her meant it was okay to go. The fire snapped sharply, sending sparks up the chimney. Outside, the snow kept falling. I've never told anyone outside the hospital, Mum said. Not until now. You'll think I'm mad. I didn't. Because what she didn't know, what I hadn't told her, was that I had seen her too. It was 5 years ago. I was 26, working a rotation at the same hospital, though by then most of the old wing had been mothballed. Still, they opened it occasionally when the main floors filled up. One night, I was covering the late shift during flu season. We'd been overloaded, and I was assigned to check on a patient down in the old respiratory corridor. Just one bed in a sea of emptiness. Room 14. The same one from Mum's story, though I didn't know that then. I remember the elevator ride down. The way the doors creaked open like a coffin. The smell of damp plaster and aged bleach clung to everything. The hallway buzzed with the weak hum of flickering lights, most of them struggling to stay on. The door to room 14 was half open. Inside, a frail man lay sleeping, the monitor above him blinking in slow, steady rhythm. I checked his chart, noted his vitals, and turned to go. But something stopped me. A presence. I glanced back into the room. She was there, standing beside the bed, looking down at the patient with a gaze I couldn't decipher. My brain tried to make sense of her. Why would a child be in a sealed ward? Why no shoes? Why that robe? She turned her head slightly, just enough that I saw her eyes. Deep, still, sad beyond anything I've ever felt. And then she turned and darted out into the hallway. I followed. She was fast. Too fast. I turned the corner, and there was no one. Only silence. I didn't sleep that night. The patient in room 14 died 12 hours later. Natural causes, they said. Nothing unexpected. But I couldn't shake it. I didn't tell anyone. Not then. But when Mum told me her story, all these years later, the hairs on my neck stood on end. Because it confirmed what I'd always suspected. She was real. Mum passed away in April the following year. Peacefully. In her sleep. Heart failure. No pain. I sat beside her bed in that same hospital. I told her stories. Read her poetry. Held her hand. And in those last hours I watched. I watched the corners of the room. The shadows. The hallway. But she never came. And I don't know what that means. Did Mum not need a guide? Had she already made peace with death? Or was the girl in the crimson robe already sitting quietly in the corner, unseen? Waiting. Just waiting. It's been a year now. I've returned to Inverness. Taken a position at the newer hospital building nearby, though sometimes I'm rotated into the old wing when overflow demands it. I walk those same halls. And sometimes late at night, when everything goes still, I feel it. Not fear, but presence. Like someone small and quiet is watching from just out of sight. And I wonder if she remembers me. I was told the surgery would be tough, but no one prepared me for what came after. The cardiac team at Cardington Medical Center had a reputation for being the best in the state. That was comforting, considering they'd be stopping my heart and cutting me open. I had a severe mitral valve issue. Congenital but manageable until it wasn't. My breath shortened. My hands tingled. Then one morning, I passed out in my kitchen, coffee still brewing behind me. The surgery was scheduled a week later. I remember the white of the walls, the sting of the 4, and then nothing. A black curtain dropped. But when I woke up, I wasn't alone. The ICU was quiet, sterile, and low-lit. I was barely conscious, the world a haze of sounds and motion. Beeping. Distant voices. Machines breathing for me. And him. I didn't know his name. He didn't wear a badge. But I remember his voice, calm, deep, steady. A kind voice. He sat next to me through the first night, humming softly when the pain got too much, holding my hand through the worst of the panic. He adjusted my pillows when I couldn't speak. Wiped my forehead when the sweat came in waves. "You're doing great," he whispered. "Just keep going." I clung to his voice like a life raft. It wasn't until 2 days later that I could speak properly again. The breathing tube was out. I was moved to step-down care and given time to rest. The nurse on duty came in to check my vitals. "Hey," I croaked. "Can I ask something?" "Of course." The male nurse who sat with me, he was tall, African-American, buzzed hair. Really kind. "Can you tell him thank you? He helped me a lot." She blinked. "We don't have any male nurses on the overnight ICU team." I smiled weakly. "Maybe he was from another ward?" She shook her head. "ICU is locked during night hours. No floating staff." "Are you sure?" I was sure. But no one matched the description. A few days passed. I didn't press it. Maybe I imagined it, drugged, sedated, in pain. Maybe my mind conjured someone to keep me sane. But then the shadows came. The room was bright during the day, with large windows that looked out over the trees and parking lot. But at night, when the visitors left and the world went quiet, something changed. In the corner of the room, near the built-in cabinets, a shape began to form. It didn't move. It didn't speak. It just watched. At first, I thought it was a trick of the eye. I'd blink, and it would vanish. But then I started to feel it, its weight, the air thickening like syrup. A prickling cold across my skin. Something was in the room with me. Not the kind presence from before. This was something else entirely. It got worse the longer I stayed. I couldn't sleep. Not properly. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt it draw closer. Hovering at the edges of my consciousness. Pressing against the corners of the room. On the 5th night, I felt it standing at the foot of my bed. My body locked up. I couldn't scream. Couldn't move. I lay there frozen, a sheen of cold sweat on my skin. Then something happened. A new presence. A soft glow bloomed near the ceiling. Like moonlight, but warm. Gentle. It descended slowly, like a mist rolling down a hillside. And in that moment, I knew it wasn't just light. It was the man from the ICU. He wasn't holding my hand this time. He didn't need to. The dark presence recoiled, shrinking back into the corner, then dissolving entirely. The light hovered for a moment longer. And then it was gone. I told a nurse the next morning. She looked at me quietly, then nodded. "You're not the first," she said. "What do you mean?" "After open-heart procedures, patients sometimes see things. Some say it's the medication. Some think it's near-death experiences. But it's always similar." "Similar how?" "Dark shapes. Watching. And then something else, something that chases them away. One woman called it the Lightkeeper." The name gave me chills. But my journey wasn't over. A week after I returned home, I was back in the hospital. A home care nurse had failed to wash her hands properly, and I developed a severe E. coli infection. It hit fast, fever, vomiting, pain that brought me to my knees. I was rushed to the ER and admitted within the hour. The doctors were quick. A second round of antibiotics, fluids, monitoring. But something was wrong. Every time my husband visited, his phone would die. Completely. From full charge to 0 in minutes. We tested it. Swapped chargers. Changed outlets. It only happened in my room. I didn't say anything until the 3rd day, when I couldn't ignore the feeling anymore. Something had followed me back. At 3 a.m., I pulled out a small voice recorder my husband had brought from home. I waited until the nurses were gone and the hallway lights dimmed. I pressed record and whispered, "Is anyone here?" Silence. "Who are you?" Playback was quiet. I almost gave up. Then soft but clear came the reply. "I am a patient just like you. Daisy." My breath caught in my throat. Daisy. The next night I tried again. "Are you still here?" Another voice. Softer. This one I recognized. "It's Grandmom, Daisy. My grandmother had died 10 years ago." I sat in stunned silence. The fear drained out of me, replaced by something else. Peace. As if they were trying to tell me, "You're not alone." I recovered. Slowly. But fully. And I haven't seen the shadow since. Sometimes, when the night grows still and my heart feels heavy, I remember that hospital room. The cold presence in the corner. And the light that chased it away. Whether it was a ghost, an angel, or something in between, I don't know. But I believe the lightkeeper is real. Because I'm still here. There's a moment in grief when the world gets too quiet. The noise of visitors fades, the bustle of nurses becomes background hum, and all that's left is the sound of someone breathing, slowly, irregularly, and not for much longer. That's the moment I found myself in, sitting beside my father's hospice bed, watching him inch closer to the end. It was a night I'll never forget, because that was the night I saw him in two places at once. My father, Thomas Wren, had always been the strongest person in my world. He'd grown up on a remote island off the Alaskan coast, and nearly died of appendicitis when he was 9. They had to boat him to the mainland, where he crashed on the operating table for nearly a full minute. He used to tell me that story like it was folklore. "I saw myself lying there," he'd say, his eyes distant. "I floated above my body, watched the nurse drop the scalpel, heard the surgeon shout at her. Then I woke up." We always thought it was a child's imagination. Until his mother, my grandmother, confirmed every detail. The dropped scalpel. The shout. The precise moment of his return. That's when I started to believe in something beyond. But nothing could have prepared me for what happened on his last night. Dad had been moved into Glenmere Hospice, a beautiful and quiet facility on the outskirts of town. They gave him a private room with a wide window that overlooked a field of tall grass, swaying even when the air seemed still. For days, he'd drifted in and out of sleep, speaking less and less. I'd been there with him each day, bringing books I never read aloud, food he never ate, and sitting in the chair beside his bed for hours at a time. On the final night, something shifted. The nurse called at 11:45 p.m. "He's showing signs," she said gently. "You should come." I told my daughter, Ava, and we drove straight over. Ava was 22, in college, but very close to her grandfather. She volunteered to sit with him first, so I could rest in the recliner tucked in the corner of the room. She held his hand while I drifted in and out of a shallow sleep. Around 1:15 a.m., we switched places. Ava laid down on the daybed, curled into a blanket, and I took her place beside my father. The recliner was now empty. The lighting was low, just a soft glow from the hallway spilling through the door. His breaths came in shallow intervals, inhales that barely rose his chest, a wheezing kind of exhale that echoed faintly. I held his hand, spoke softly. "Dad, it's okay. You can go if you're ready. I'm here." Then I noticed something strange. The chair across the room, the empty recliner I'd been napping in earlier, was no longer empty. He was sitting there. My father. Not the one in the bed. That body was still there, skin sunken and pale, barely moving. This other version of him sat upright in the recliner. Clear-eyed. Serene. As solid as the chair beneath him. I didn't feel fear. Only stillness. He was watching me. Watching himself, too. His gaze moved slowly between us, like he was trying to take it all in. It wasn't a ghost. Not quite. It didn't feel cold or supernatural. It felt gentle. Purposeful. "You've done this before," I said aloud quietly. "You've already crossed once." His lips didn't move, but his eyes softened, like he'd heard me. "And now you've lived a full life," I continued. "You've raised your family. You've told your stories. It's okay to rest now." The recliner didn't creak. The figure didn't blink. He simply sat. Then slowly the vision faded. Not like a light being turned off, but like fog rolling away in sunlight. I looked back to the bed. My father took one last breath, and was still. We didn't talk about it immediately. Ava and I spent the next few hours with his body, waiting for the transport team. We lit a candle, played one of his favorite songs, a Scottish folk ballad he used to sing when he cooked. I didn't mention the vision. Not until the funeral. Ava and I were folding his old flannels for donation when she looked at me and said, "You saw it too, didn't you?" I froze. "The recliner," she said. "He was in it." I nodded, tears rushing to my eyes. She gave a shaky laugh. "I thought I was dreaming." "You weren't." In the months since, I've thought a lot about that night. About what it means to see a person watching themselves die. About how something can exist in two places at once. I believe now what I only suspected when I was younger, that death isn't abrupt. It's layered. We start to leave before we're truly gone. Pieces of us step out of time. Some call them souls. Others call it memory. Echoes. But to me, it was my father saying goodbye in the only way he knew how. Quietly. By watching. Sometimes I visit Glenmuir just to sit on the bench outside his old room. I used to think death came suddenly. One moment someone was here, breathing, blinking, talking, and the next they were gone. A light switched off. A line severed. I thought it was quick, cold, and clean. But then I started working at Grey Hollow Assisted Living, and I learned that's not how it works at all. Death is quiet, slow, lingering, and sometimes it's not alone. Grey Hollow is tucked away in the woods, just outside a quiet Pennsylvania town. The building used to be a private home, a massive, rambling thing built in the 1800s with wide staircases and creaky wooden floors. Eventually it was turned into a care home. By the time I joined the staff, it had been converted to a modern facility in all the ways that mattered: security systems, adjustable beds, medical equipment, but the bones of the house were still old. I'd been working there for 5 years when I started noticing the signs. Little things, always on the edge of perception. A door creaking open on its own. A shift in the shadows of an empty hallway. A cold spot in the middle of a warm room. It didn't happen every night. Only sometimes. But always, right before someone passed. My name's Jordan, by the way. I'm a night caregiver. Mid-30s. Skeptical by nature. I didn't come to Grey Hollow with any beliefs about ghosts or spirits. I came because the pay was decent and the hours fit my life. The first time I really noticed it, was with Mr. Radley. He was in room 6. Quiet man. Always wore the same old knitted cardigan and liked humming Elvis songs when no one was around. He had late-stage dementia and didn't speak much anymore. One night, I was doing rounds. It was around 2:10 a.m. I remember because the old grandfather clock in the lounge had just finished chiming. I passed by room 6 and paused. The door was open. I know I had closed it earlier. I stepped inside. Mr. Radley was lying still in bed, eyes closed, breathing but shallow. Then I felt it. A presence. Like someone was standing just behind me. Not behind my back, but just off to the right, behind my shoulder. Close enough to feel, not close enough to see. The air felt dense, like the moment before a storm. My arms broke out in goosebumps. I turned. Nothing. No one there. I backed out slowly, left the door ajar. By morning, Mr. Radley was gone. I brushed it off. Lack of sleep. Imagination. Old buildings make noise. But then it happened again. And again. And again. Each time the same. A presence, just barely perceived. Always before a death. And never the same room twice. One night I asked Maria, one of the longtime nurses, if she'd ever felt anything strange. We were in the staff kitchen drinking vending machine coffee, the kind that tastes like pennies. She gave me a long look. "You felt them?" she asked. I nodded. "You too?" She sipped her coffee, then leaned in slightly. "We call them the quiet ones." I blinked. "You've named them?" She shrugged. "You work here long enough, you stop pretending they're not real." According to Maria, almost every nurse and aide who worked night shifts at Grey Hollow had at least one story. A figure in the corner. A door that closes when no one's around. A whisper, inaudible but unmistakable, just as a patient takes their last breath. "They're not ghosts," she said. "Not in the way people think. They're guides. Escorts, maybe. Ferrymen. They show up before death like attendants on the other side. Just doing their job." I didn't know what to say to that. It sounded insane. But I'd felt it. That presence. And I couldn't explain it away. Over the next year, I paid attention. Careful attention. And the pattern held. The night before a resident died, I'd feel the same things. Temperature shifts, faint footsteps with no source, a sense of being watched from just out of view. But there was no fear. None of the malicious energy you see in horror films. No scratching, no screaming, no possessions. Just quiet. Heavy. Ironic for something invisible but weighty. like the air itself was thicker. The quiet ones. There was one night, though, that stood out from all the rest. The night that made me truly believe. It was a stormy March evening, wind howling outside, the power flickering on and off in the west wing. I was on with two others, Elena and Desmond, both fairly new hires. We were short-staffed, of course. We always were. Ms. Little, our most fragile resident, was in room 3. 98 years old, bones like feathers, but her eyes were sharp and she remembered everyone's name. She was on comfort care by that point. We knew the end was near. Around 2 a.m., I checked in on her. She was asleep, breathing faintly. As I turned to leave, I saw movement in the hallway. Just a flicker, something darting past the doorway. I stepped out. The corridor was empty. The lights buzzed overhead. And then I heard it. Footsteps. Slow. Soft. Coming toward me. But no one was there. I don't scare easy. But something about those steps, so deliberate, so real, made my skin crawl. I whispered into the air, half joking. I know you're here. Just please be gentle with her. The footsteps stopped. And I swear on my life, I felt something brush past me. Like a breeze with intent. 10 minutes later, Ms. Little was gone. That night, Desmond refused to go near the west wing alone ever again. He said he'd seen a shadow cross the hallway from the corner of his eye, then disappear. When he went to look, he found a framed photo, one that had been sitting on a table, face down on the floor. No wind. No open doors. No explanation. We checked the cameras the next day. Static. Just for those few minutes. Then back to normal. Not everyone believed, of course. Some of the younger staff laughed it off. But over time, even the skeptics learned not to ignore the signs. We all developed little habits. Saying hello when walking into an empty room. Avoiding certain mirrors after midnight. Leaving the door cracked in room 9, just in case. Not out of fear. Out of respect. And yet, I never saw them. Not directly. Not until Grace. She came to Grey Hollow in July. Yeli Onzet, only 43 years old. Beautiful, witty, an artist who painted with her eyes using tracking software. She wasn't afraid of dying. She told me once, it's harder for the people who stay behind. We grew close in her final weeks. She didn't have family. No visitors. I started spending my breaks in her room, reading to her, helping her play music. One night, she asked me, "Will it be painful?" "No," I said honestly. "We'll make sure you're comfortable." She looked me straight in the eye. I mean the leaving part. I didn't have an answer. On her final night, I stayed after my shift. I didn't have to. But I knew I wouldn't forgive myself if I didn't. She slept lightly, shallow breaths. At 3:12 a.m., she stirred. Eyes half open. Then suddenly, calmly, she looked to the right of her bed and smiled. "There you are," she whispered. My stomach dropped. "There's 2 of them," she said. "They're very quiet." I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. Grace looked back at me, eyes soft. "It's okay, Jordan. I'm not alone." And with that, she exhaled. And didn't inhale again. I sat there for a long time. And then I saw them. 2 shapes. Just shapes, darker than the shadows around them. No faces. No features. Like silhouettes cut from night itself. They stood near the door. Not threatening. Not sad. Just waiting. One turned to the other. Then they both vanished. I've never spoken about this out loud, not in detail. But I still work at Grey Hollow. Still do nights. Still say hello when I walk into dark rooms. I still feel them sometimes. Not often. But enough. People think working around death makes you numb. It doesn't. It makes you aware. I've worked permanent nights for nearly 15 years. That means I've seen my fair share of strange things. The usual chaos of A&E, unpredictable patients, staff half-laughing through exhaustion, and the odd prank pulled during dead hours to keep us sane. But only one thing in all that time ever truly unnerved me. It didn't involve a ghostly figure floating down the hall or a cold breath whispering my name. It wasn't even violent. It was a bin. Just a bloody hospital bin. And I still can't explain what happened. It was a regular shift on the trauma ward. Northbridge General isn't some old Victorian place full of dark history. It's a bland mid-20th century hospital in the Midlands. Beige walls, too bright lighting, smells of bleach and dry heat. Functional and forgettable. That night, I was working alongside Shelley and Mick, 2 nurses I'd done hundreds of shifts with. It was just past 2 a.m., the witching hour for weirdness, and we were finishing up a routine patient check in room 9. That room's one of 4 bedded bays we have on our ward. 2 beds on each side, split by curtains, with a bin in the corner near the main door for used PP and dressings. One of those big pedal-operated bins with a heavy-duty plastic lid. Nothing about it stands out. Except this time. We'd been in the room 10 minutes, maybe more, sorting out a dressing change and making notes. All quiet. 2 patients sleeping soundly. No machines going off. Just standard end-of-night stuff. Then we heard it. Bang. 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 All of us turned at the same time. The bin, the one in the corner by the door, was moving. Not rolling. Not shifting. The lid was bouncing up and down like someone was stepping on the foot pedal over and over again. But no one was near it. Worse, there was a pillow sitting on top of it. Had been there all night. We sometimes use them to weigh the lids down or stop that awful creaking sound they make when you open them. But even with the pillow, the lid was slamming. Up. Down. Up. Down. We froze. No one spoke. Just stood and watched as this heavy bin kept clattering, the movement deliberate and rhythmic. You know how you freeze when something goes against the laws of how things are supposed to work? That's what it felt like. Our brains trying to rationalize something that made no sense. After about 5 or 6 loud bangs, I stepped forward, slowly, and lifted the pillow off. Instantly it stopped. We looked at each other. Mick swore under his breath. I bent down and opened the bin fully. Just a few paper towels. No medical waste. Nothing that could have caused it to force itself open from inside. No trapped air, no weighted pressure, nothing spring-loaded. We tested the pedal. Worked fine. But it wasn't stuck. And the way the lid had been bouncing, fast, rhythmic, no one could have done that without standing there stomping it over and over. Except we'd been in that room the whole time. It was not a prank. There was no way someone could have slipped in and out without us seeing or hearing. And the kicker? The patients didn't stir. Both remained completely asleep, which made it even creepier, like it wasn't meant for them to notice. Just us. After we finished up, we left the room and stood in the corridor. Could have been the aircon, Shelley said, not very convincingly. There's no vent near it, Mick replied. We went back inside to check. Sure enough, nothing that could have caused suction or pressure change. No windows open. No airflow. We joked about it, as you do. Ghost of room 9, Mick said, trying to sound nonchalant. But his face was tight, and Shelley didn't laugh. I didn't sleep well the next day. Now, I'm not the kind of person who jumps to supernatural explanations. Hospitals are weird places, full of suffering, energy, emotion, and strange occurrences you chalk up to stress or fatigue. But that wasn't stress. That wasn't fatigue. That was deliberate. And the more I thought about it, the more it started to bother me. Because that room, room 9, has a bit of a reputation. You don't get told these things officially. It's all word of mouth. Quiet conversations over tea during shift change, or when someone new gets spooked and asks if anyone else has noticed something odd. Turns out room 9 has been weird for a long time. Not cursed, exactly. Just off. Patients in that bay tend to decline fast. Not all of them, but more than average. I checked the logs once out of morbid curiosity. Not proper research, of course, just shift memories and patterns, and it lined up more than I wanted it to. But it's the experiences people talk about. Someone once swore they saw their dead wife standing at the end of their bed. Clear as day. Another nurse, now retired, claimed she heard footsteps pacing between the beds one night when the bay was empty. Lights flickering when the electrics were fine. Buzzers going off when the cords hadn't been pulled. It's always subtle. Always just enough to make you second-guess it. Until the bin. A few weeks later, I brought it up again to Shelley. We were in the break room, exhausted and leaning over mugs of terrible coffee. You remember that bin thing? She didn't look up. How could I forget? You think it was something? She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, You ever heard of a residual echo? I shook my head. It's not a ghost, exactly. More like a memory burned into a place. A loop. Something happened, and it plays out again and again. Doesn't interact. Just repeats. And this place? She shrugged. God knows what's happened in that room. People die. Some violently. Some alone. And you think that bin thing was part of a memory? Maybe. Or maybe it wasn't a memory at all. After that, I avoided room 9 when I could. I still did my rounds, still helped when it was busy, but I never lingered. I started noticing more things. Not as obvious as the bin, but strange enough to make you pause. Curtains swaying without airflow. That feeling of being watched. Machines that dropped out of rhythm for a second, then self-corrected. The worst was when I was walking past and the door opened by itself. No one inside. No wind. Just opened. I stood there, staring at the darkness beyond the curtain. It didn't feel malevolent, but it didn't feel empty either. I've never seen an apparition. Never heard voices. But I've come to believe that some rooms remember. Room 9 is one of them. I think something happened there. A death that stuck. Or maybe not even one. Maybe it's the collective weight. The sorrow that seeps into the floor and walls and refuses to let go. Maybe that's all ghosts are. Emotional residue with just enough energy to disturb the world around them. Or maybe it's something more. I left the ward 6 months ago. Transferred to a quieter hospital out near the coast. Nights are easier there. Less crowded. Less history. The buildings are newer. The lights are brighter. But sometimes when I toss something in a bin and hear the lid snap shut, I still feel that prickling down my back. Like something's watching. Like something remembers. I've worked at Laurel Pines Recovery Center for a little over 2 years now. It's a 30-day residential program tucked deep in the hills outside Asheville. Quiet. Remote. The kind of place where people come to try and crawl back to themselves. Most of the time, it feels hopeful. Healing. There's laughter in the cafeteria, music in the art room, people crying and hugging on their 28th day. You start to believe people can change. That recovery is real. But sometimes, when the halls are dark and detox is full and everyone's asleep, there's a heaviness. Something watching. And it's always near that doorway. I used to work nights during the week, mostly because I liked the peace. No group sessions, no family visits. Just me, the low buzz of fluorescent lights, and the occasional shuffle of someone wandering the halls, struggling to sleep. There's a hallway that leads to the male dorm. Long, narrow. Halfway down, there's this strange cutout in the wall, no door, just a frame. It used to lead to a storage room, I think, but now it's just dead space. Empty. Clean. And used. The first time I felt it, I was walking past that doorway at 1 a.m., doing my usual rounds. I stopped cold. I didn't see anything, not directly. But I felt it. Someone standing to the right of me. Not behind. Not in front. Just to the side. Like they were waiting. Not hiding, not aggressive, just there. I turned. Nothing. Stillness. I kept walking, pretending I didn't feel the cold trail of air brushing my arm. It became a pattern. Every time I walked past that doorway, I felt it. For weeks. Then, just like that, it stopped. I figured I'd imagined it. Stress. Lack of sleep. Typical stuff. Until I started hearing the stories. We don't tell patients about him. That's important to say. This isn't one of those shared campfire tales passed around to freak out new staff. Most of us don't even want to talk about it. Because the people who see him, they always describe the same thing. And they don't know each other. One of our long-term patients, Micah, came to me during his second week in detox. Shaky. Pale. Still in withdrawal. He asked, "Is there a man who watches the rooms?" I froze. What kind of man? Tall. Shadowy. Wearing a hat. He hesitated. Wide brim. Not a baseball cap. Something older. I asked if he saw him during a dream. Micah shook his head. He was in my room. Watching. And then he was gone. It wasn't the first time I'd heard it. And it wouldn't be the last. The Shadow Man. That's what staff started calling him. People see him in their rooms, reflected in windows, standing in corners. They describe him exactly the same way. Tall, silent, wide-brimmed hat, face in shadow. Always there for a moment. Then gone. I never saw him full on. But I've caught glimpses. A flicker of movement behind the glass door to the courtyard. A shape ducking behind a hallway corner. Moments I tried to shake off, but couldn't forget. And it's always around the doorway. That cutout. Like that's where he enters from. One of the weirdest parts? The doors. The detox unit has a double set of security doors that open to a small patio courtyard. Thick glass, heavy frame. You have to push them with both arms to get them open. Even wind doesn't move them. But sometimes, usually late at night, they swing wide open. Violently. Like someone's barreling through them at full sprint. Of course no one's there. No patient. No animal. No breeze. It's not possible. But it happens. Always toward the end of the month, when most people are close to graduating. And that's when things get the heaviest. There's a small rock garden on the edge of the property. We let people paint stones on their final day, write their name, their sober date, a quote that meant something to them. It's a tradition. But here's the thing, not everyone who paints a rock makes it. Some relapse. Some vanish. Some overdose. Those rocks? They start to feel like markers. Graveyard stones. And sometimes I think the shadow man walks among them. Waiting. Watching. Not to harm, maybe not even to frighten, just to see who comes back. And who doesn't. One night, about a year ago, something happened that made me take all this seriously. A new patient, Devin 19, fresh off a 3-day bender, had been brought in by his older brother. Withdrawals hit him hard. He was angry, defensive, trembling with fear and shame. Second night, I found him curled in the hallway. Pale. Eyes wide. He said he saw someone watching him sleep. A man in the doorway. I walked him back to bed, assured him he was safe, but his room was ice cold. We checked the vents. Nothing broken. All other rooms were fine. Then his roommate, who hadn't even spoken to Devin yet, told a nurse, "There's someone walking through our room at night." They didn't compare notes. Didn't even talk. But they both described the same figure. 2 days later, Devin tried to leave AMA, against medical advice. We talked him down. But he left on day 12. Overdosed the next week. That one stuck with me. Because I'd seen the figure too, just before Devin ran. Standing in the cutout hallway. Half shadow. Hat tipped forward. And then he turned and was gone. There's no record of who, or what, he might be. We've checked the archives. The facility used to be a daycare decades ago, then sat empty for years before reopening as a rehab center. No violent history, no documented deaths. But something was left behind. Or maybe it was drawn in. You get enough pain in one place, it stains the walls. It calls to things. Maybe the shadow man is one of them. We had a staff member once, Leah, who swore she saw him peek around the corner of the hallway. She said he looked confused. Not evil. Not angry. Just like he hadn't meant to be seen. She quit 2 months later. Didn't say why. I don't think he's a demon or a ghost in the traditional sense. He's never hurt anyone. Never spoken. Never touched. He just watches. But always at night. Always near the doorway. One patient, Nate, made it to day 30. Painted his rock bright blue. Wrote, "Still here. Still trying." He hugged the staff. Smiled for the first time in weeks. We found out 3 months later that he'd died. Fentanyl-laced pill. Gone before anyone could reach him. A few nights after I heard the news, I went out to the courtyard. I don't know why. Just felt pulled. And I saw him. The shadow man. Standing by the rock garden. Still. Watching. Not moving. I stepped toward the glass. And he vanished. I think about Nate a lot. I think about all the ones who almost made it. And I wonder if that shadow is just the echo of failure. A memory shaped like a man. Or maybe it's someone who didn't get help in time. Someone who now walks the halls, watching others try, hoping they make it farther than he did. Hoping they leave him behind. I transferred to day shifts eventually. Easier on the body. Easier on the mind. The first time I heard about her, I laughed. I'd only been working at Dunreath Infirmary for 3 weeks. It was a cold, wet October. The hospital itself was perched on the edge of a moor, surrounded by fog, sheep pastures, and silence. It looked like something out of an old war film, all crumbling brick, ivy-eaten windows, and slate roof tiles darkened by time. I was new, fresh out of training. Night nurse. Float position. No say in assignments. My first week, I was placed on North Wing, which the other staff half-jokingly referred to as the cold wing. Not because of the temperature, but because of how it felt. That's where I met Morag. Morag was a senior nurse in her late 50s. Short, broad-shouldered, silver hair pulled back so tightly I thought it might pull her eyebrows off. She'd worked at Dunreath longer than I'd been alive, and she had the no-nonsense presence of someone who'd cleaned blood out of corners you'd never think to look. She was the one who first mentioned her. We were sitting at the nurse's station in the early hours of the morning, flipping through patient charts. The kind of shift where everything's still and your brain starts to hum. "North Wing's been quiet," I said. "Kind of eerie." Morag sipped her tea and said casually, "She's been quiet lately." "Who?" "The stairwell girl." She didn't elaborate. Just turned a page and went on reading. That name stuck in my head all morning. The stairwell girl. It sounded like something from a campfire story or a ghost tour in Edinburgh. So the next night I asked her, "Who is she?" "The girl?" Morag didn't look up from her clipboard. "A bairn. Maybe 7 or 8. Shadowy thing. Never speaks." "She's a patient?" "No. She's a memory. A shadow. A ghost, if you like. I raised an eyebrow. Have you seen her? Morag finally looked at me. We've all seen her. They say she lives near the service stairwell at the far end of North Wing. That stairwell has been sealed for years. Padlocked. Disused. But the door remains, and sometimes, according to staff, it unlocks itself. Or creaks open an inch. Just enough to be noticed. The girl is seen nearby. Only ever at night. Always walking. Never running. Always silent. Some say she appears in reflections. Others say they hear the sound of her feet tapping lightly across the linoleum floor, though she never wears shoes. But the strangest thing? She's almost always seen just before someone dies. At first, I thought it was just folklore. Stress-induced hallucination. Shared myth. Hospitals generate those like bacteria. You work long hours around death, around grief, your brain fills in blanks. People start telling stories because it's easier than silence. But then I saw her. It was just past 2 a.m. We'd had a rough night. A code blue in room 218, a confused patient pulling out their 4 in 223, and a fall risk trying to escape out of a second-story window. I was walking back from the supply closet, past the east corridor that led toward the old stairwell. And I saw her. Just ahead. A girl, small, barefoot, wearing what looked like a dark navy pinafore dress. She didn't move like a person. She moved like a thought. Gliding, soft, feet never fully touching the floor. She turned the corner near the stairwell door and disappeared from view. My breath caught in my throat. I wasn't scared, not exactly, but I felt watched. Like whatever she was, she knew I'd seen her. I ran down the corridor. Turned the corner. Nothing. Stairwell door was locked. Padlock intact. I checked the adjoining rooms, empty. The whole wing was silent. I didn't tell anyone at first. I didn't want to sound like I was cracking up 3 weeks into the job. But Morag knew. The next shift, she handed me a chart and said without looking at me, "You saw her, didn't you?" I hesitated. Yes. She nodded once. Room 218, then. The room where the code blue had happened the night before. Patient passed an hour later. After that, I started hearing more stories. From nurses. Cleaners. Even a junior doctor, drunk off exhaustion and espresso, muttered that he'd seen her face in the elevator doors as they closed. She never interacts. Never speaks. Never touches anything. But her presence always comes before death. One night, I asked Morag what she thought the girl wanted. "Maybe nothing," she said. "Maybe she's just a guide. Not here for us, here for them." "For the dying?" Morag nodded. "Maybe she was lost once. And now she's helping others find the way." Weeks passed. Then months. And slowly I stopped doubting. I saw her twice more. Once, reflected in the observation window of a closed ICU room. Once, just standing in the hallway, watching an old man as he slept. She vanished both times. But the encounter that changed me, truly changed me, happened during a snowstorm. The roads were closed, staff were thin, and I had to sleep over at the hospital. They gave me a cot in a disused office near the stairwell. Of course. Around 3:30 a.m., I woke up to the sound of whispering. Not loud, not urgent, just a voice humming, or maybe speaking in a rhythm I couldn't place. I sat up, and there she was, standing just outside the glass window of the office door, her face partially turned away. Not menacing, not even sad, just present. And for the first time, I didn't feel watched. I felt included, like I'd stumbled into something private and sacred. She raised her hand. Not waving, just lifting it slowly as though acknowledging me. Then she turned and walked toward the stairwell. The padlock was still there, but the door was open. Just a crack. And then it closed slowly with a soft metallic click. When I opened it the next morning, no one there. Just stairs, descending into dark silence. And footprints. Small. Bare. Leading down. That was 2 years ago. The sightings continue. I no longer doubt. And now, when I'm with a patient during their final hours, I find myself glancing toward the doorway, toward the shadows, toward the old stairwell. Sometimes I see her. Sometimes I don't. But I always feel her. She's not frightening. She's not cruel. She's not lost. She's working. Like we are. Quietly. In the background. Hospitals are strange places. Half in this world, half in the next. I had died. Not metaphorically, not dramatically, clinically. Twice. Once at the crash site, and again on the operating table. Both times they brought me back. Both times, I wish they hadn't told me, because knowing I'd been that close to the edge made everything else feel thinner. Like the veil between life and death hadn't quite sealed back up properly. But this isn't a story about death. Not really. This is a story about the nurse who washed my hair. The accident happened on a Tuesday, 7:28 a.m., to be exact. I was driving to work, coffee in one hand, radio on low. It was supposed to be a normal day. I never saw the other car. A drunk driver blew through a red light, going nearly 70, and hit me head-on. The airbags saved my life. The seatbelt cracked 2 ribs. The windshield cut through my face like paper. My skull was fractured. Left side. From temple to crown. I remember none of this. Just waking up in the ICU 3 days later, barely able to move, the ceiling above me so white it hurt. The first thing I noticed was the silence. No beeping. No monitors. Just the hum of the overhead lights, and the rush of something cold dripping into my fore. The second thing was the smell. Hospitals have a scent that's impossible to forget. Antiseptic and plastic, undercut by something stale and metallic. The scent of things held together just long enough to be let go. The third thing was my hair. It was matted, crusted, heavy. There was blood in it. So much blood that I could smell it, coppery, thick, dried in patches like old paint. I tried to lift my hand to touch it and couldn't. That's when the panic set in. Not from the pain. Not even from the fear. From the shame. All I could think was, they're gonna shave it off. I'd always loved my hair. Long, dark, thick. It was the one part of my body I'd never wanted to change. I'd braided it for my high school graduation. Dyed it deep auburn for my college thesis defense. Worn it down the day my mother died, because she always told me I looked stronger that way. And now it was filthy. I felt like I had lost something I hadn't even realized I'd clung to. The next night, just after 3 a.m., someone entered my room. I didn't hear her come in. She moved quietly, that special kind of quiet you only learn after hundreds of shifts. The way only night staff walk, like they're afraid of waking ghosts. She didn't speak at first. Just closed the door softly and wheeled in a small cart. There were towels, a basin, shampoo, a cup. She looked about 40. Kind eyes. Blonde hair pulled into a low twist. She wore navy blue scrubs and no-name badge. "I'm going to wash your hair now," she said gently. My throat was dry, and I couldn't answer. She didn't seem to need one. She rolled me slightly to the side with surprising strength and tucked a towel beneath my neck. I braced for pain. There was none. Her hands were warm. The water, somehow the perfect temperature. She began to pour it slowly, gently, over my scalp. The sensation was indescribable, like being pulled backward into a memory I'd never had. Something maternal. Intimate. Deep. She worked silently. No small talk, no commentary. Just the quiet rhythm of fingers parting through tangles of blood and debris. It felt like a ritual. She didn't drench the pillow. Didn't splash the floor. Every movement was practiced, perfect. No nurse I'd ever seen worked like that. When she was done, she wrapped my head in a towel and said simply, "You're clean now." And then she was gone. I slept for the first time in days. The next morning, the day shift nurse came in and blinked in surprise. "Oh, someone cleaned you up," she said. "That's great. Do you know who it was?" I asked. She checked the log. Nobody documented it. What was her name? Blonde hair. Blue scrubs. The nurse frowned. We only had 2 RNs on overnight. Both brunettes. And I was here until 2:30. I'd have seen her. That's when the questions started. I asked the evening supervisor. He had no idea. I asked the ICU coordinator. She checked the rosters. No one by that description had worked that night. They even asked around, not because they believed me, but because they were curious how someone had pulled off a full wash without setting off alarms or leaving a mess. No one came forward. I started to doubt myself. Maybe I dreamed her. Maybe it was a hallucination brought on by trauma and drugs. Maybe the whole experience was stitched together from my subconscious needs. But the towel was still there. Soaked. Still warm when I'd woken up. And the blood? Gone. I left a thank you card at the nurse's station. Weeks passed. It sat there untouched. I left the hospital 6 weeks later. Scars hidden beneath hair that had miraculously been spared the blade. A shattered collarbone on the mend. And the nagging sense that something had brushed against my life that I hadn't understood, and still don't. But the story doesn't end there. Back at work, I started returning to the ICU regularly. Not as a patient, but as part of my job in hematology. I'd stop by, deliver results, make small talk, try to catch glimpses of her. That face. That calm. But she was never there. I asked around, casually at first. Then more directly. No one knew who I was talking about. Even the security team, which included my dad, who'd been working nights at that hospital for nearly 20 years, tried to help. He pulled footage from the corridor outside my room. There was nothing. No one entered between 2:55 and 3:40 a.m. Just silence. So how do you explain that? How do you explain perfect technique, a soaking towel, and a floor that stayed bone dry, unless someone had done it with care? How do you explain a woman you can't prove existed who gave you back something you didn't know you were mourning? Maybe she was an angel. Maybe she was a ghost. Maybe she was just a tired, kind soul who forgot to sign her name. But I don't think so. She moved like someone on the edge of this world, like someone with one foot in the light and one in the dark. And I've never seen her since. That moment, those 20 minutes, left a mark on me. And I've tried since then to pass it on, to hold space for people at their lowest, to offer calm when panic takes over, to clean something that feels ruined and say, "You're clean now." Because she gave me more than clean hair. She gave me peace. I've worked in emergency medicine long enough to know that hospitals are full of ghosts. Not the bedsheet kind. Not floating, transparent figures or screaming phantoms. I mean echoes. Residue. The kind of presence that lives in the corners of rooms, in flickering lights, in the hum of the air when it's supposed to be still. If you've ever worked nights in an ER, you'll know what I mean. You'll know there's always one room no one wants to be alone in. For us, it was room 35. Beckley Regional isn't a big hospital, but we handle a lot of trauma. The ER has 20 beds, plus overflow rooms in the back. Room 35 isn't always open. It's tucked behind a long corridor, near where the ambulance bay connects with the old service elevator. We used it for one thing, and one thing only. The dead. When someone passed in the ER, and the morgue team wasn't immediately available, or when families wanted privacy before letting go, we moved the body to room 35. It was as respectful as we could be. But no one liked going back there. At first, I thought it was just the atmosphere. Death changes a space. You walk in after a body's been removed, and the room still feels full, like grief clings to the walls. It smells different, heavier. But room 35 was different. Even when it was empty, it felt wrong. The lights buzzed louder. The air was colder. There was a draft, but no vents. And sometimes you'd swear you saw someone pass by the door out of the corner of your eye, only for the hallway to be completely empty. It started for me during a late-night restock. I was alone in the back corridor, pushing a cart filled with gauze and bandages. Room 35 was open, the bed stripped, lights off. As I passed the door, I saw someone walk by. A man. Tall. Dark hair. Moving with purpose, like he knew where he was going. I stepped forward to stop him. "Sir? This area is restricted." No answer. I turned the corner. No one there. The exit door hadn't opened. I checked the whole corridor. Nothing. Just silence. I told myself it was a trick of the light. Long shift. Too much caffeine. Maybe a reflection from the glass. I moved on. Until it happened again. 3 nights later, Julie, one of the most no-nonsense nurses I've ever met, came running down the hall pale as a sheet. I'd never seen her rattled before. She said she'd gone into room 35 to grab a blanket for a patient. And something had touched her. Not brushed past. Not brushed against. Grabbed her shoulder. Firm. Deliberate. She screamed. Turned around, expecting someone to be standing there. There was no one. Security checked the tapes. No one entered that hallway for over 20 minutes. The blanket was still clutched in her hand. After that, no one wanted to go in alone. We stopped storing supplies in room 35. Stopped using it unless we had to. But we still had deaths. And the dead still needed somewhere to go. One night, I had no choice. It was a quiet shift. One of those strange ones where nothing goes wrong until everything does at once. A code blue came in, cardiac arrest, no ID, no contact info. We tried for 25 minutes. He didn't make it. We cleaned him up, tagged him, and moved him to room 35. As I pushed the gurney through the hallway, the lights flickered overhead. Once. Twice. I paused. Then kept going. The room was freezing. I set the brakes. Pulled the sheet up. Closed the door behind me. And heard footsteps. Behind me. I turned, heart hammering. Nothing. I stood there for a moment, unsure if I should say something. Then, without thinking, I whispered, "He's here now." The air shifted. Not warmer. Not colder. Just still. Like something had settled. I backed out and shut the door. The next morning I asked around. Turns out, I wasn't the first. A few of the orderlies said they used to hear whispering in the room, so faint they couldn't make out the words. Just the tone soft. Urgent. Sad. One of them, Marcus, said he once found the bed unmade after they'd cleaned it hours before. Sheets crumpled, like someone had been lying there. Another nurse swore she heard crying. But no one ever stayed long enough to be sure. Because there's something about room 35 that tells you not to linger. Not if you want to leave with your mind intact. I still think about the man I saw. Tall, confident, moving with intent. He wasn't confused. He wasn't haunting the place in the traditional sense. He was working, maybe guiding someone, maybe escorting them somewhere else. Like the room is a station, a crossing, and he's just one of the attendants walking between two worlds. People think ERs are all chaos and adrenaline, and they are. But in those quiet moments, when the trauma bay is still and the lights buzz low and room 35 stands empty, but not really, you realize how thin the line is between life and death, and how easy it is to see through. If you know where to look. I don't work there anymore. Transferred to pediatrics at a different hospital. Brighter hallways. Laughing kids. Less death. But every now and then, I'll find myself awake at 3 a.m., the shadows thick in the corners of my room, and I'll remember the sound of footsteps, the cold grip on a shoulder, the way the lights always flickered when death walked by, and I wonder if he's still there. The man I saw, still moving through room 35, still doing his job,